Everyone, I'm Richard Taylor. Look who I have here today from Australia. These are all Australian Final Cut pros. Ian Anderson at the top left. I'm on the top right. Lee Herbert on the bottom left. Shawn Lander in the center. And Matt Goddard on the bottom right. And you guys got me up very early this morning trying to schedule this.
And we do appreciate it.
Yeah, you're keeping us up late, Richard. But
well, that's true. Yeah. That's true. I actually have another one of these scheduled, and I think it's going to be switched where it's going to be night here, evening here, and early morning there, but I'm not sure yet. Because when I get one person scheduled, then the next person says, well, can we do this? I said, okay, well, let's see what we can work out. You guys worked out fine. Lee we were going to have him on the second one. He said he'd better if he comes on this one, so that's why we got him on there.
Thank you.
Nice. Yeah, it's
so
9:30 on a Wednesday. There's not too much else on.
Well, that's true. That's very true. So let me add a couple of things. So I heard it's cold in Australia.
Yes.
Do you have snow yet?
We have had some snow, I think, in Melbourne anyway. We've, what was it, in the Dandenongs, I think, Matt, wasn't too far out of town. I think it's the first time since about 2008 we've experienced snow that low.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to look too hard on Twitter to find the footage of kangaroos jumping through the snow.
Well, yes, I think I saw one. Did one of you guys post one recently?
I think Alistair might have posted one.
Oh, okay, Twitter. Alistair.
Yeah, meanwhile, 2,000 kilometers north, snow will never be seen.
Patience.
No.
Oh, well.
So right now it's 74 degrees. When I go running in the morning, it's like running in warm bath water. It couldn't be more perfect temperature. Humidity's a little bit high sometimes, but I know we're going to be getting
23, 24 or something, is it?
Yeah.
I guess.
Is that what it is?
It's a nice mild temperature for a morning run. Wow.
It is. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It is. It's
I'm going to have
fantastic.
to resort to Spotlight to find out what on earth you're talking about, Richard.
You mean temperature-wise?
Yeah.
23.3 apparently.
It's funny.
It's
I was in the hospital. I was getting checked up, physical and stuff recently, and when I went in to get my weight, they had it in kilograms, or what's the measurement?
Yeah.
Kilograms?
Kilograms.
So, of course, I don't know what that is. I have no idea. The nurse told me that the hospital has made them switch all weights and measures to the metric system, right?
Wow.
However, I said, well, doesn't the scale do both? She said they disabled everything but the metric system. But she had to figure it out. She had a piece of pad and paper and figured it out because she needed to know herself what it meant to us.
Well, welcome to the present, Richard.
Yes. Well, all science in America works in metric.
But they told us when I was a kid we were going to switch over to the metric system. Mm-hmm. You guys know Al Andrew? No. He says hello from Australia.
Oh, g'day.
Okay.
G'day.
Yeah.
G'day.
And I'm not even an Aussie.
Yeah. So we got that message. So that's the deal. I'm sharing this to a bunch of Final Cut Pro groups right now, Facebook groups, because we're on Facebook Live and YouTube Live and what's the other one? I always forget.
Twitter.
Yeah, the Twitter one. Periscope.
Periscope.
Yeah, exactly. We should be anyway. I'm presuming we are.
Are we on Final Cut Pro X editors?
Yes.
Right. So they're going to get to see two of their moderators, so the ones that give them grief.
Yeah, there we are.
Yeah. Yes. Two of the people that close down comments every couple of hours.
Well,
that's right.
You guys, you listen. I don't have the patience you guys have. I have a couple of small Facebook groups, Final Cut Pro groups. You guys have a much more patience because dealing with how many 30,000 people?
Yeah, there's 32,000 now. I think it is or something.
We're getting to 33. Yeah,
33,000.
Getting about 30 a day. I'm finding applying. No one answers all the questions. So.
No. So if you don't answer, for anyone watching who's not part of the group and wants to be, if you don't answer the questions, you won't get in.
Right.
It's that simple.
Yeah. I moderate a group for a InDesign user group, which is something else I do up here, and it's amazing the number of people who won't respond to the simple questions. So it's the Brisbane InDesign users group. So I have very simple questions. Do you live in or near Brisbane?
Right.
And are you a graphic designer?
Right.
And you get people
Some of the
applying
answers are,
from with just blank responses, or from I'm from Europe, or it's it's not going to work.
No, exactly.
Some people think the X in Final Cut Pro X stands for something quite different.
Yes.
X-rated videos.
Yes.
And they think that our group is...
Yeah.
Well, now I know which group I'm going to start.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. I have a couple of groups. I'm going to keep them small, like 1,000 or under, typically. Or there's one that's over 1,000. But I ask simple questions: no spamming, and do you use Final Cut Pro or something like that different? And I'll let them in if they belong to. If we have some common groups we belong to. Because sometimes, sometimes the countries maybe don't understand the question. Some of them are from India and other places. But by the same token, if they do one thing, one post about spam, they're gone and they're blocked instantly. So, 1,000 or so, I can manage that.
I recently joined a neighborhood Facebook group, which has an interesting policy on advertising. Basically, it's allowed the first day of the month. And that's it.
There you go.
So the first day of the month, there's a heap of businesses saying, hi, I offer, grass cutting or, hedge trimming or babysitting or whatever. And the rest of the month, it's calm and quiet and, neighborhood stuff. But I thought that's not actually a bad idea.
Yeah, I don't mind somebody, plugging their plugins or their product. That's not a problem. It's just that you can tell when the spam comes in. They're talking about something completely different than Final Cut or whatever the heck they are. So that's what I don't care about somebody that has a plugin or something. That's fine. That's related. So what is going on with Final Cut these days in Australia? How is it? I know it's not widely adopted, but you guys are examples of dedicated Final Cut Pro users that are existing in Australia. So I know Shawn has an opinion about that because he's... I think you said you haven't worked with Final Cut professionally for like a couple of months.
And that was only because I was finishing off my own project. But I'm about to start a job very soon where they'll be using it. It's more of an restoring old archives for a famous Australian television show called Hey Hey It's Saturday. Cool. So they ran for over 20 years, and thankfully they managed to save every episode before it hit the dumpster. And it's all on 1 inch, so I'm threading up a VPR3 again, which is something I haven't done for quite a while, and we're just bringing them all back and looking at repurposing the content. And Final Cut Pro is absolutely, in conjunction with Keyflow Pro, a really good combination for doing that, keywords and managing a massive archive, and a jellyfish, of course, we're using.
Well, of course.
Yeah. So because we want producers, we've got 3 or 4 producers who are out in a sort of open plan area that'll be going through the footage, just picking out bits and then sending it to a couple of edit suites for going online or going off to news or something, because a lot of these people, and sadly it's 20, 30 years ago, are either pegging off or celebrating very significant birthdays, and it's useful to be able to pull that footage of them sort of from the 80s or 90s. So it's a great way to use the content.
For sure.
So that's basically what I've been doing recently, but all my television work more recently has been Avid, unfortunately. The new Avid.
So the new Avid, the brand new version?
Yeah, the new version, yeah.
That's surprising that they're actually using like the new Avid and not like a version a few versions back where they had some specific thing.
It. That's one good thing about Avid is that you can use any version pretty much. as long as you don't have to go back too far, like a decade.
Like Skype.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you're going back to version, I think pre-version 7, then it gets a bit tricky. But that's one good thing about Avid is you can work with the latest version and go back 5 years, and it'll work fine. So there is no, because they're just bins. So that's one of the advantages that Avid had.
So we just got a comment from the Philippines. Says, thank you for this. From Clarksville, Philippines.
Clarksville.
I'm not sure where that is. My dad was in the Philippines during the war.
Yeah, right.
So Shawn, if Final Cut Pro 10 never existed, suppose they stopped Final Cut Pro at version 7, what would you be using now?
I'd still be using Avid.
Okay.
And I pretty much, if I was doing work at home on my own projects, I would probably be using Resolve. I think, especially now.
Right.
It's the way that it's going. Before Resolve, I may have gritted my teeth and paid the subscription and gone with Adobe, but thankfully that didn't need to happen. So, yeah.
You've dodged a bullet by not having to go to Premiere.
Yes. Plenty of my friends did, and it doesn't look like it has been a pleasurable experience for anybody, really.
I hear a lot about Premiere in different places that I'm kind of surprised it's there, but
yeah.
It's one of the weird things about the video industry is there's so many people approaching it from so many different points of view. I just went to a workshop this week because I was interested to hear the point of view of someone who's a film director. And she directs, short films, docos, music videos, and ads. And it just struck me what a completely different place in the industry that she comes from, or most directors come from,
right,
compared to, everyone in this chat comes from a different place. So, you two guys who are down the screen from me, so Shawn and Matt, you work in TV a whole lot more than I do. I don't really work in TV at all. I worked, very tangentially on a show about 10 years ago. Did some motion work. But it always struck me that the entrenched workflows that you get in TV are not going to be friendly to any kind of change. And they're certainly not going to be friendly to fewer people working on a job. And you get people with very, very different ideas. Just, you can look at the way that Hollywood is just glommed onto Avid and will glue there forever. Whereas, the TV show that I'm, on spec that I'm working on at the moment is getting close to finished. And it's literally me and one other guy shooting everything. And I'm doing most of the editing. But he's got Final Cut as well. So he'll occasionally edit something or keyword or favorite and, fling me a lean library so we can collaborate that way. And, I'm comfortable just attacking all of these jobs. So, doing some basic sound and doing color and, getting the editing right and doing the animation. And that's completely anathema to how things are done in TV or film, where you have a whole lot more people doing very siloed, specific jobs.
Yeah.
But, I've got way too many hats. I've realized that there's some, teaching and designing and programming and editing and all this stuff is ridiculous. And it just means that people don't think I'm good at any one of those things. Nobody wants to hire a generalist. They want a specialist.
They don't?
Generalists are good. No.
They want you to specialize in 3 or 4 things, though. That's the trick. They want a specialist, but it's a specialist within like this kind of frame. Whereas,
exactly. Listen, when I see ads now in like Washington, the East Coast, they want a videographer, they want an editor, they want a colorist, they want a graphics motion person, they want all these things as one, and they'll bill it as an editor or they'll bill it as a videographer, but they want expecting all these things in one.
And they're going to pay them like an intern.
Well, of course.
Yeah,
of course.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. Great opportunity if you know After Effects, Resolve, Final Cut, and Avid,
right,
and you can shoot and have your own gear. We've got an opportunity for you.
Yeah. You must be able to juggle.
Yeah, we'll give you some exposure.
Yeah, we'll give you some exposure.
We have a large social media reach. Yeah, I know you do.
Yeah.
Mm.
So all these different users are going to have different opinions on, Final Cut's no good for this, or, we always use After Effects for titles, or, we just farm the audio out. We don't think about that. And it's hard to change minds when, if somebody said on, no, this is what I do this job. It's like, well, you could do that slightly related thing just as easily, but people just get used to the speed things take.
Yeah.
Although also in fairness to a lot of working professionals, a lot of the time you're building the plane while you're trying to fly it at the same time, and a lot of working professionals don't have the downtime to learn a new thing. Like I'm trying to get certified as a DaVinci trainer, and I have no idea when I'm going to have time to sit down and actually do it, because I'm sort of like blocked out now until the middle of November. And so I can sort of appreciate, I say to people, if you give me 10 minutes, I'll show you the basics of Final Cut and change your life. And yet they can't even give me 10 minutes. So,
Right.
Yeah. It's understandable.
TV is going through such a huge, the Netflix coming to Australia and all the streaming content has basically destroyed all the sort of small shows, and TV has basically gone back to what it does best, and that's big reality shows where it, our live TV and things like that. So you need 15 editors, 8 assistants, those kinds of 10 loggers, and Avid is just like unquestionable what you have to use, really. There's nothing that even gets close to it. Yeah, and they've got all the infrastructure there. Yeah, so they've got 30 edit suites in one spot, and it's all set up.
A friend of mine from Canada just got flown to Fiji to cut Love Island US. And that wouldn't be possible if he didn't know Avid back to front. And, they can just, chuck him in a demountable with a suite and go for a few weeks.
Yep.
Fun gig.
Sure. Sure.
If he's got a window in that demountable, if not, you just...
And it's reality. He won't have a soul.
No.
I'll tell him you said that.
I think for me, a lot of the time when you go into places, when a lot of my work is going into advertising agencies and small post-production houses, and advertising agencies especially, the issue that they have is the entrenched Creative Cloud scenario where they're getting Premiere for every seat.
Right.
Of InDesign and Illustrator and Photoshop that they're using. So it makes sense to just punch all those out onto those machines. The IT guys can do it from interstate, and they don't have to worry about another piece of software that they have to support. I did a job a couple of years ago at an advertising agency, and I just, under the radar, they booked me to do on-set dailies and stuff, and I said I could do that and get it in, and I used Final Cut on set to get all the dailies in and get it all logged. And then when we went back to the agency to actually start cutting it, I dropped a copy of Final Cut onto the machine that I was using and just kept cutting on that until somebody came in and went, hey, what's going on here? And then you explain it to them, and they're fine. And they're like, well, I got the job done. I got the job that you needed done. And when I walk away, everything that I've done is easily transferable over to your Premiere library, and the guy who's never touched this piece of software can keep on going with it. And that's what happened. But what we were able to do on set with it was they were able to have basically logged rushes and selects all done by, I think we had a 2-day shoot, and I did probably 2 hours of work after that 2-day shoot in the morning after to sort of clean up my library a little bit. And then all the stuff that they would have spent a week doing in Premiere with one of their other interns was done before that even, so they were already a week ahead before they'd started.
Right.
Yeah. But it had to go to Premiere in the end. and I knew that going in, but I wasn't going to budge.
Well, yeah.
And sneak it in there as best I could.
If I was a youngster in there right now, just getting started in the business, I'd learn more than Final Cut. I'd learn Final Cut, and I'd learn probably Avid. I'm really I don't like the Adobe subscription model at all. I stopped working with them when they started that, because the reason is it's not if you're at the company and they can afford the subscription. That's one issue. The issue is when you leave the company, you have to pay for the rest of your life. You can never stop paying. You stop paying, whatever version of the software you have stops working. That's what I don't like. If you could freeze a version, that's a different story, but you can't. You either pay the rest of your life or you don't edit on Premiere. So
it's a similar deal, obviously, with the design software. But the subscription model has pluses and minuses. But
sure.
I think what the Adobe suite has kind of done for a lot of creative industries is obviously good and bad. It's great that people have access to all this software, and obviously they're good software. Photoshop and Illustrator are really good. InDesign is still excellent. And look, I use InDesign professionally. I've designed books with it and billboards and everything in between. But it hasn't changed in any significant way since release. And it's needed competition for it since 2003, when it was really first introduced. And so the competition has arrived now, Affinity Publisher, which sadly I can't recommend to two of my clients who could really use it because it's missing some of the key features like caption support, which is essential for the kind of books they're doing. But it lets you do new things creatively. So you can literally flick across to Photoshop-style tools, take a brush, and paint on the page layout directly. You can put a mask on the whole thing and blur this bit out. You could add any kind of curves adjustment to the entire layout, to all these images at once. So all these things which designers have, wanted the power to do, which will probably never arrive in InDesign, are in this other tool. So every designer needs to pick that up, to give yourself a new idea of what you can actually do with design, and B, to remind Adobe that there's competition out there, because even if you can't use it for every job, it lets you do more interesting things, which is kind of like what Final Cut does. And I think there's a lot of more people need to look outside the bubble of what's the industry standard and embrace a few additional apps as well, because maybe you can do something more interesting with one of those. I've picked up jobs from people where 1 year's event video was done in Premiere. The next one I got, and I did obviously in Final Cut, and I made titles that used the fonts that the client wanted to use the colors, and I made up some little titles in motion in a nice style, and then they had me revert them to Arial with square rectangles that didn't fade or do anything, because that's what the previous year's person had done in Premiere. And it was just, but these are on brand. These are perfect. No, we'll go back to the other old boring ones, because that's someone with a hat on. I'm just an editor. I'm not a designer. And it's come on, wear a little bit of a hat. Pretend to wear a new hat. It's okay.
It's funny because in design I often refer to Avid as I don't know if anyone remembers Quark Express.
Yep, sure.
Yeah, and that was like the software to use for publishing, and they just wouldn't change, no matter what. And you could see the tide was turning, and they just would not change. And
they had horrible 10 years without a feature update.
Customer service. Customers were always complaining about them. I didn't have it, but they always were complaining about their customer service. So I'm glad InDesign came along.
But the users were loyal, and then InDesign came along, and it was like the new kid on the block, and it was doing new things, and that's when Adobe was actually innovating. I mean, they're still innovating, but they're not really. I don't know. They're innovating in a sort of safe way, I guess.
Yeah, they innovate in the user interface, but they don't make it possible to do new looking things. They don't give designers much new control. Whereas, designers could use something like 3D text, which we've had for the past few years, or,
like After Effects.
That would be nice.
You see people trying to edit in After Effects, and you look at these timelines that are about 500 layers because you can't even have two objects on one layer. It's just, oh man, surely it's time to update that interface. I mean, it's been what, 35 years or something.
Well, are they stuck because of the code they're using and stuff, I presume?
Yeah.
Not sure. I think they're just worried about losing their user base. I think
yeah. Adobe always have to play that dance. They have to, ride that knife edge of everything's the same. Don't worry, you can keep doing things the way you used to. And we've added some new features which look really cool, but you don't have to use them. And don't worry, everything's the same. Yeah. We're not doing what Apple did.
And that's the challenge with humans. We all want change until it changes, and then we hate it.
That's right. Exactly.
Well, I think Logic did it the best. Logic went from version 9 to version 10, and they added new features. They added a drummer and a bunch of other stuff, but it was still very familiar, and it worked almost exactly the same way as Logic 9 did. So, but they did it. They had one opportunity, is they did it after Final Cut Pro had their big fiasco to 10. So I think they stepped back and said, we're not going to do that.
Yes. It was a smart move.
So it's funny
Apple
looking at the Avid. Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's funny looking at the Avid boards because the new Avid, which is basically just a reskin. I mean, there's a couple of little things, but it's the update is so minor. And people are losing their minds on it, like it's
you put fins on it.
Yeah, that's right. It's very, very funny to look at. So and these are the people that were probably dragging people from Steenbeck's or video suites, saying, come and this whole new way of non-linear editing. They were probably the pioneers back in the day. And now that they're all 35 years older, it's just like, oh my God, they've changed this icon.
Well, Final Cut Pro, yeah. Final Cut Pro has done, the users have complained about ridiculous things sometimes as well, haven't they? About changing something, I mean, all the different softwares. I mean, we're Final Cut Pro, advocates for the most part. Well, we are, all of us here. But there's been some ridiculous things people have complained about in Final Cut Pro over the years. I mean, it's just, so I don't think that's specific to Avid or Premiere. It's kind of like, we like to complain, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Lee mentioned earlier, it's like we want something new. We want it, and we want it the way that we want it specifically. And if it doesn't meet our own personal expectations, then we also feel like we have a valid reason to complain because we feel hurt. And then when we attach the extra kind of emotion to a brand like Apple, it becomes so much more than it needs to be. You just have to look at the Mac Pro discussion. It's a product that hasn't even been released yet, and people have been up in arms about it since the moment that keynote happened. It's like, guys, it's just a computer.
You're absolutely correct. There's a lot of emotion to software and to Apple specifically. So let's talk about the Mac Pro for a minute. So for years, I mean, I was not a fan of the trash can Mac Pro. I was a huge fan of the original Mac Pro, the cheese grater, and I also liked the iMac design for the most part. But then they came out with, I kept saying for about a year, I've been saying they're going to do a mini cheese grater. But they didn't do that. They did a full-sized, very high-powered cheese grater. So what they're saying is it's too powerful. It's too professional. There's too much in it. We didn't want 8 PCIe slots. We only wanted 4. Well, they only use 4, but that's what you get.
So you got.
I think in a way it's Apple's way of saying, oh, you want power? There you go. Now shut up.
Yeah, take that.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I think there is room in the market for a Mac Mini Pro. there is.
Well,
but it doesn't mean Apple's going to make it.
Well,
and that's us with them doing what they want to do. I'm sure they've done the research.
Well, they also could do you're right, they could do a Mac Pro with 4 PCIe slots or whatever, which, that brings the price down at some point. But this is the first salvo in the not professional. People who've been saying Mac, they haven't had professional hardware for a while. And then now they're saying it's too professional. There's too much stuff. We don't want all those PCIe slots. Of course, the price tag, everybody knew that was going to be high. Who didn't know that? Yeah. Everything Apple does is that way.
Yeah. Well, I've got a Mac Pro, but I wouldn't be touching the new Mac Pro because it's about double the price I paid for my last Mac Pro. And it's,
right. But how much is an iMac Pro if you load it up?
I think, for me, depending on what you're doing, the iMac Pro is, it's too much. In Australian money, what is it, 8,000?
Yeah, but for a decent one, you're looking at about $11,000-$12,000 Australian.
Right. So
it depends on what you're doing.
Right. Well, the thing, I'm going to get a Mac Pro, and there's a lot of reasons. First off, I need
your wife will let you.
Well, I'm not married, so that's one of the reasons I can get one.
That's easy. Yeah.
So he's got $10,000.
I have the money. I've at this point I have a Mac Pro fund, and I've funded the base model at this point. So I still want to upgrade the CPU and all that. So I want to get some more money. Mm-hmm. But here's the reasons. First off, I love the form factor. I love the old cheese grater. It was my favorite Mac by far, form factor wise. I just love. I didn't do like an extreme tinkering, but I did exchange SSDs. I loaded it with regular SSDs. I upgraded graphics cards, RAM, all that. So I love the form factor. So the other thing is right now I'm shooting in 4K, but I expect to be shooting in 6K and 8K, and I don't want a machine that's going to be bogged down. So I want more power, not less power for the future to kind of future-proof myself. I need PCIe slots. That's another thing. Fair. Okay, because I have audio in my recording studio and I need PCIe slots for that, for different things. And I'm not doing the Mac Pro for video. I'm doing it for audio because I like running a lot of plugins. And boy, do they take up resources. You can't run them in real time as much as I like 24 tracks, 32 tracks, and I like to put plugins on each track. So that's one of the other main reasons. Another thing is I like a 34-inch or larger ultra-wide monitor, okay, so which I can't use with the iMac. The iMac has an aspect ratio. I prefer a longer monitor for a longer timeline. And the last thing is I have the money for it. So those are the factors why I'm buying it. So
I'd actually like to ask the group, speaking of the monitor, I predict that within 12, possibly 16 months, we will see a not as highly spec'd monitor come from Apple, just because I think there will be people just want an Apple branded monitor, and I'm talking like, just like an ad agency, they just want it on their desk, So what are thoughts? I'm seeing a lot of no's.
No, people want stuff that Apple's not going to make.
That's true.
They've brought back the 5K LG monitor, 27-inch, which people thought had disappeared maybe because Apple was going to do one, but that one's back. So that's, at least in the short term, I'd say it's not going to happen. I suspect if Apple do make one, it'll be more expensive than the LG, and the LG wasn't like a cheap monitor. But look, there might be room because there really aren't that many cheap, decent IPS, wide gamut, HDR-friendly monitors out there. Even, that you're spending a fair bit of cash to get a monitor. You might as well buy an iMac. And if Target's monitor mode actually worked on these newer machines, you'd be buying the entry-level one as just for the monitor sometimes. Mm.
True.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice if they did fill that gap in the market, but like you say, they're unlikely to do it unless that new Mac Pro monitor sells to a certain point where they think, well, maybe we can sell to a middle ground here somewhere, whether that's because that Pro monitor has not sold very well, or whether it has sold well enough that they just go, oh, well, let's throw something else in the mix. There's no way of knowing, but it would be, it's another avenue for us all to kind of hope for. Now that they've given us what we all wanted for the last 6 years, now we've all got something else to hope for, which is a slightly cheaper version of what we've all been asking for. And I was doing, from the day that the cylindrical trash can Mac Pro came out, if you put away $20 a week from the day that came out, after you said, I'm not going to buy one of those, then you would have enough now for the entry-level Mac Pro.
Exactly.
Hang on.
That's exactly right. Well, it's like, everybody doesn't need a Mac Pro. And do I absolutely need one? No, I don't. But I have the funds, and I love the form factor. And if I didn't
Sorry, keep going.
Well, if I didn't get the Mac Pro, I'd be getting an iMac Pro, and I'd still be spending, $7,000, $8,000. It wouldn't be just the base model. So the amount of money is going to be approximately the same. I'm not getting a high-end 28 core. I'm going to probably get the 12 or 16 core Mac Pro. So, but when I couldn't believe that when they showed the Mac Pro at the WWDC, I thought they were going to say, no, we're just kidding. They brought that picture. I said, no, this can't be real. This can't be real. A full-size Mac Pro cheese grater, 2019.
Well, bigger hole.
I thought they were going to say, no, we're just joking. Here's the real one. But they didn't.
I think the issue is for a lot of people is that Apple's Pro machines at the super high end on the desktop side, so the iMac Pro and the new Mac Pro, are running server class chips from Intel, which really aren't faster than the consumer chips. And they don't have more cores than the consumer chips. The advantage is they're meant to be able to run continuously, so 24/7 at max speed and without breaking. But if you talk to if you see really techie people on YouTube talking about this, then they'll say Intel's just charging a lot more money for almost exactly the same thing here. And for me, that's kind of the issue. I would love to see a Mac Pro with less stuff using consumer chips, because I personally I'm not getting any of the value out of the server stuff. I don't run stuff 24/7. So I think the Mac Pro really is, it's a machine built for super high-end professionals, which is who they ask for. Who they asked, what kind of machine do you want? And my worry is there really aren't enough of those people out there. Like for the monitor, that's a colorist's monitor.
Right. Well,
but how many colorists are there versus people who would spend a fair bit of cash on a very, very nice Apple branded monitor, but maybe not $6,000 American dollars?
Sure. That makes complete sense. I'm not sure how many of the trash can Mac Pros they sold either. I don't expect it to be high numbers. I don't think Apple did that for high numbers, the new Mac Pro. I think they did it to just stay in the professional hardware market. And whatever they sell, that's what they sell, the numbers. It's not going to be, I doubt if it'll even be hundreds of thousands, maybe tens of thousands initially. But I think there's a space for a mid-level version of the Mac Pro with 4 PCIe slots. They could keep the same enclosure, so they won't have to redo that. Just a different motherboard or whatever they're going to do. Bring the price down, whatever they can do. But anyway, it's not too professional. It's what the professionals. It's like when they had a couple years ago, Apple brought the professionals into a room and asked to talk about the future of the Mac Pro, and the professionals said, "Okay, we want this, and 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 this," and Apple said, "Okay, we're gonna give it to you, give you all those things."
This isn't like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer designs a car, is it?
I missed that one. What was that one?
And he just puts in every single feature and ends up with a gargantuan monstrosity. Now, the new Mac Pro is not a gargantuan monstrosity. It's a really lovely, beautifully designed thing. It's just, it's too much. It's not for high-end professionals, obviously, but it would be too much for me. And I suspect, for every one high-end Hollywood colorist, there's another 1,000 mid-level multimedia designers who won't be able to swing that upgrade.
But wouldn't they be satisfied with an iMac or an iMac Pro then?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So.
But it's okay. But there's all kinds of reasons why people buy one machine or another. And
right.
I think by not necessarily hitting every niche that they could, they're going to lose, they're going to lose some sales, they're going to lose some goodwill, they're going to have, there's a million people will hate or love Apple for a million different reasons, most of them not valid, but, it's just more ammunition to the, Apple's walled garden for the exclusive elites, yada, 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 whatever.
Well, but no matter what Apple does, they're not going to please everybody, not even close. Nope. They're a big target. Yep. So if Apple brought out a mid-level Mac Pro instead of this high-end, what would the pros be saying?
If the Mac Pro is already there, then then they wouldn't have anything to complain about.
Well, if they needed 8 PCIe, who expected 8 PCIe slots? I didn't. I would be excited if it had 4 originally. I was talking to somebody on one of the shows, and I said, well, if they have 4, I'd be pleasantly surprised. And they have 8. One of them's a short one for that in and out card that they have, but still, So I'm ecstatic. Because here's the other thing about the Mac Pro. Normally, my refresh cycle for Macs is 2 to 3 years. I get a new Mac every 2 to 3 years. With the Mac Pro, I expect that to be extended to 5 or more years because I can upgrade it. Right?
Yeah.
Well, so I won't be losing that.
It's more powerful. It'll last longer.
Right. So I won't be losing that. When you buy and sell a Mac, you lose $1,000 or $2,000, whatever it is, even though they hold their price really, really well. But I won't be losing that in the same cycle. I'll be keep it for 5 or 6 years. I just recently brought out my 2008 Mac Pro. I had it in my recording studio downstairs, and I was remodeling down there, so I put it away. I recently brought it back out, updated to Mac OS 10.11.6, upgraded the RAM a little bit, put in a 1 terabyte SSD, and put in a USB 3.1 PCIe card. And I'm keeping that because all of my hardware infrastructure, like Avid, is based around that machine. Everything I have works with that machine. My in and out cards, my mixing board, everything. It works fantastic. The interesting thing is it runs the latest version of Digital Performer and the latest version of Waves plugins. Both of them are V10s, but it doesn't run the latest version of Logic, only up to 10.3.2, which is fine. I'm only using it for an ingest machine. I'm only tracking with it. I'm only taking audio in. It does 24 tracks of 24-bit audio in its sleep. So I didn't buy that. But if I get the new Mac Pro, I'll probably consolidate my upstairs room where I am now, which is my video room, and that room, and put them both together downstairs, which is a much, much bigger space. But I need PCIe slots.
Yeah.
What was that?
Sorry. That was me clicking on something I should not have clicked on.
I said, Matt, do you have a guest over there we don't know about?
No, my apologies. I did not expect that to autoplay with its sound on quite that loudly.
Excellent.
Let me close that browser. My apologies for that.
Alex Gallner says he just got on off a plane. Did he miss anything?
No.
Alex.
Not yet.
I wonder about also with the Mac Pro, like not just answering the question of power, but it was like they were losing a lot of those influences that, I'm sure we've all been responsible for a lot of our family and friends and relatives going down the Apple path because we're the professionals who use Apple products. And I've seen a lot of people leaving, honestly, the Apple ecosystem because of that. Mac Pro wasn't powerful enough, and people were going with Hackintosh or worse, going to PC just because they weren't getting, and they were getting a bit jaded. And they're because they're high profile, the tech person of their group, of their family, they weren't maybe recommending Apple products anymore because they weren't using them for their own, jobs. Because certainly for me, I switched my whole entire family, all my friends, I switched to Apple. So I've probably been responsible for 30 or 40 people in the long run switching to Apple.
Likewise.
Because I was using, back in the day, a Quadra, a 900, and then later, other machines and putting them in the edit suites and things like that. But I just wonder if Apple saw that losing that edge. They had been sort of dulling, the message a little bit by people call it dumbing down. They say it's simplifying things and making it easy, and more intuitive. But I think the same thing with Aperture going to Photos and other programs. Final Cut Pro is a classic example.
Well, they learned from Final Cut Pro. They learned the hard way. I worked on the documentary with Brad Olson, and I was privy to some of the stuff that didn't make it into the documentary and seen some things. But they learned from that. They know that was a mistake. I mean, even Steve Jobs might have not done it if he was healthy at the time. That the way the inventor of Final Cut Pro 10 said that he wanted to give away a free version of Final Cut Pro 7 with every purchase of Final Cut Pro 10, for example. So that didn't happen.
I don't know if you're responsible for this particular edit, but it's probably Brad. But I'm extremely grateful to whoever edited that documentary and put me in the previous shot to Randy, the creator of Final Cut. So thank you. Thank you for me saying something and then Randy saying something. It's like, yes, that's it. That's all I needed.
There you go.
That was good.
Was he agreeing with you?
So speaking of off the tracks, there's an abridged version on YouTube you can find.
Yep.
So that's certainly interesting.
No, that's great. It's good to have a free version. I've sent that to friends who I've been trying to convince into Final Cut forever. And now that it's free, they can finally see what it's all about.
Do you think that as Final Cut Pro advocates, do you think we're more sensitive to keeping Final Cut Pro in the forefront, and every time there's something that happens on Final Cut Pro, we bring out the horns and say, oh, look at this, Final Cut Pro did this and Final Cut Pro did that? Sometimes I think it's a little too much. We're protesting or we're advocating, or over-advocating, because like when it does a movie, for example, well, we already know it can do a movie. It's done a movie. It's done major Hollywood movies already. We know it can do it, but every time something comes out, we're like, look at this, it can do this, it can do this. You guys think that that's maybe a little too much sometimes?
Maybe sometimes, but I think part of the cynical part of me thinks that part of that over-advocating comes from there's also something in the back of our minds that says, well, this could go away at any minute. So we want to we love it so much, we love using it, and we don't want it to go away. So by getting the more users we can get using it, the less likely it is to suddenly disappear on us. Now, that's completely there's no backing for that opinion. I don't know one way or another whether the Pro Apps team is going to go and start just making an iOS version of Final Cut 10 or not. But there's a fear that comes with it. So when we see something like Whiskey Tango Foxtrot or Focus or any of the other higher profile projects that come on board, we have to then think to ourselves, right, well, do I want to go back to those people that I had conversations with but still haven't gotten on board and have this conversation a second or a third time? It's like, is this project the one that gets them over the line? And if I get them over the line, then maybe they'll get somebody else over the line and somebody else and somebody else. And so the community grows and the safety of that community becomes more entrenched. I think that's what's so great about the community that we have. And that the smaller community of pros that talk in forums like this, and also the larger, the Final Cut 10 editors Facebook group. Like, knowing that there are 30,000 people sitting in that group, there's something reassuring, as frustrating as it is to have to moderate. It's reassuring that there are that many people potentially using the software that we use professionally every single day. And that's people using it for YouTube who are probably making more money than I do in a week from making YouTube videos. You know, some of them probably are. Not a lot of them, but some of them probably are. But there's a nice spectrum of people. So I think over advocating, the people that think we're over advocating are the people that we were never going to get on board. It wouldn't matter how hard we tried. You could scream it from the rooftops from now till eternity, and they won't budge.
Well, Apple's announced, a year and a half ago, 2.5 million Final Cut Pro seats. It's got to be well over 3 million, up to 4 million by now. That's a lot of people. I mean, Avid would kill for those numbers.
It's the different aspects of the market, though. So, I mean, the things which I end up doing a lot of the time are corporate videos, they're event videos, they're internal messaging, stuff like that. There's a lot of demand for that. That needs more editors and needs more people, but it doesn't have the same cachet as this film or this TV series or any of this stuff. And Apple doesn't do a whole lot of talking about this, whereas Premiere does get promoted at Adobe's regular trade shows. Final Cut gets a mention once every second yearly keynote.
If we're lucky.
And that's because Apple's a huge company, so they've got a lot of stuff to promote, and it's almost impossible for something Apple makes to get up to the top of that list and get shown. So I'm pretty sure that's why it doesn't get mentioned more often. And they do case studies, but if there aren't brand new case studies for things that even topped the last thing they spoke about, I guess it's not going to get as much promotion, which is a shame. But
I'd almost like to see a sort of a change in mindset, in the sense that, I don't know. I know a few people who work in motion picture and things like that, but most of the people that I know who work professionally in this industry are working in corporate or TV or even, heaven forbid, YouTube. So, yes, sometimes we want to, as evangelicals for Final Cut Pro 10, we want to sort of go, look, it's doing this really cool, amazing, big thing. But if we actually sat down and had time to speak to these people, instead of impressing them by this big thing that, between you and me, none of them are ever actually going to do themselves, instead we can sit down and go, hey, I'm someone who does the same stuff as you, and it works great for me because of these reasons. So it's almost like, we need those big shining things every now and again. But I think on a day-to-day basis, I think we and maybe even the marketing team for Final Cut could do better at promoting it at the level where it's actually being used. And you're going to get that's how you get those 3 million seats up to 4 million, 5 million, so on.
Yeah, and some of the best looking stuff that I've seen on TV is not on TV. It's either on Netflix, or it's really high quality stuff on YouTube. Like MKBHD's videos are so well produced, really nicely edited. He's using Final Cut, but they look great because he's shooting on a Red, and they all look amazing.
And he knows how to shoot, because the camera
does know how to shoot. He does a great job. Of course, the camera matters. You and I both know that, Lee. But
we know it too, Ian.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yes, of course. No slights intended.
Okay.
But the look, his stuff looks great. There was another show as well, and I have no idea if this was cut on Final Cut or not, but Fully Charged. That's a show about electric cars that's got fantastic editing, fantastic shots. They're out Top Gear with one single host who doesn't make innuendos and who knows an awful lot about cars. It looks fantastic.
I better check that out.
Yeah, Fully Charged. It's one of the hosts is Robert Llewellyn, who is Crichton on We've Lost Someone, who is Crichton on Red Dwarf, and the other host, I can't remember the name, but he knows an awful lot about cars, and he's popping up a bit more. Really well produced. So look, it's, I don't know. There's
I come at it from a selfish point of view, I guess. I do evangelize it a bit, but I do it just because I hate using Avid all the time. It's so frustrating. And I was one of those guys that got everyone onto NLEs in the beginning. Like I was running the training and I was evangelizing Avid because I wanted people to see a better way. You know, the first time you use and you get used to using computer-based editing when you've been in videotape or film,
sure,
and you're just getting stuff done so quickly, you just go, wow, this is amazing.
Absolutely.
And Final Cut, while not a complete revolution, was very different to the norm. And so it took a bit of getting used to, but I'm twice as fast with Final Cut easily.
Yeah.
And I can make it look better, and I can do better graphics, and I can export it quicker, and just everything is faster about it. So I want to be able to use it all the time, and I want my friends to be able to use it too, because I see them suffering. You know, it's like they shouldn't be like this. You know.
Yeah.
And just someone on the Avid boards today was saying, "Oh, isn't it great when you've just saved and then Avid crashes? You don't, that fear of, was it 15 minutes?" And I'm going, "Oh my God, it's just like I feel unlucky if I've lost 2 seconds worth of work."
Sure.
I'm annoyed if my mouse pointer isn't in the same spot when
Right.
Yeah.
And things like that. I just think, wow, we've got to get these companies to try and change, to give us the technology is obviously there. It's there in Final Cut. So why can't Avid? Why can't Adobe? We don't all have to switch to Apple, but why can't these other companies innovate a little bit more? At least give us something that's not, 90s application reskinned.
So Apple watches these broadcasts. I want to put a face to the person who requests dupe detection. Can you raise your hand? Shawn Lander is the one that is the main proponent of dupe detection. I'll take responsibility for a scrolling timeline for sure. I've been saying that for years, but you're Mr. Dupe Detection. And it was, they do obviously know about that request. I guess they're trying to figure out how to implement it.
With every feedback I send them, I just put a little footnote at the bottom. Oh yeah, and dupe detection, please.
So we had some couple of comments. One of the comments is from Chris Larson, who said, "What are other people saying that Final Cut Pro is lacking as far as the pro features? Are they right on any of them?"
Dupe detection.
Well, that's one.
Collaboration built in.
So
yeah,
was Final Cut?
Mixer.
Yeah. Those are all good things. Do you think Final Cut doesn't seem like it was built with collaboration in mind? Not that they can't implement it, but
Final Cut Server. Anyone remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. But
I think Final Cut 10 is actually more ready for collaboration. If you just open up a library package and you see it's very much like looking at Avid. You're looking at separate files for events.
It's
whereas Final
ready.
Cut Pro 7 was just one object, one project. And sharing was difficult and fraught with danger, but everyone did it because Final Cut Pro
fraught with
back
danger
in the early 2000s it was because you could easily accidentally overwrite somebody else's work.
No, I'm thinking of
there
Harrison
was no
Ford.
bin locking or anything like. Yeah.
Have you guys played with PostLab?
Not yet.
No,
not yet.
Okay, so get Felipe to give you a demo. I've had a live demo with Felipe, and PostLab solves all the problems. It is Final Cut Pro collaboration. So Apple just needs to buy Hedge and give it away for free for everyone, and that is collaboration sorted.
Yeah, I've had Jasper Seegers on the show, and I've had the owner of Hedge on the show talking about that as well. I tried to get an update, but he was on vacation. When Hedge added the ability to name stuff as you bring it in. They just added that. Kano's had it, which I really like, because I do organization in the Finder for big projects all the time before I create a library.
Well, the way PostLab works is you aren't just dragging stuff like you're closing out of your library, you're uploading it to a server, it gets uploaded, but only the new changes get uploaded, and then it gets downloaded. So the demo I did, you didn't even have to use external media. It was smart enough to just upload the changed files from the library. It was great. It all just worked.
I've had a look at it. It looks great for remote collaboration. I'm not so sure about it's, in a great big working environment with 15 to 20 people.
It's possibly the older version where you could install it completely locally. Might have been a better fit for that, but you needed a lot more technical know-how to set that up. And yeah, it's not exactly, I think, what people want. I think that's maybe going to remain the good answer for remote collaboration, and maybe Apple will do a better, local-only solution, which is what I think, a lot of TV stations and, feature collaboration groups want, which is probably who they're listening to, I guess.
Right, exactly. So Apple has pre-announced an update to Final Cut Pro in the fall. Is that only to coincide with the Mac Pro, which is also supposed to come out in the fall, or is it something independent, do you think?
To do with metal, I think. To do with Catalina.
Is there any metal support in Final Cut Pro now?
Not much.
I don't think so.
I think.
None?
Not much.
Okay.
So some things will get a bit faster. I think it was already fast, but I think there'll be more things will be more amenable to being accelerated by an eGPU, which is probably, to be honest, going to be my upgrade path over the next few years, is to just get an eGPU, because then I can plug in my laptop or plug in my iMac. If the eGPU is fast enough, maybe I could get rid of my lovely iMac and just use a laptop with an eGPU. And I think that's unlikely, but I think that's going to be one of the bigger things. I saw a Facebook post from somebody who I won't name, because I'm not sure if the post is still up, because it's the kind of post that I think Apple might have asked them to take down.
There you go.
But it's absolutely someone who should know exactly what's coming. And I can't say how I know they should know that. But it was basically saying that it's probable that this update is mostly not a new features update, wherever this one coming is.
I've heard that as well.
They could be wrong. Who knows?
I sincerely doubt that. When Apple goes to a major number, typically, as well as the optimization, as well as the metal incorporation and stuff, they absolutely will have new features. I just can't see them not doing that. They've already, since the last version, I'm sure they've already developed some new features. They'll add them in. I just can't imagine that they wouldn't add major new features.
I think I can guess at least one of the new features.
What?
Well, because they were showing off 8K footage at WWDC, at the very least, in the resolutions you can pick, they'll be 8K.
It's probably a safe bet.
That's probably a safe bet, but I think it can do it now, can't it?
It can, but it's not in the default options.
Oh, okay.
You got to type it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't think they'll wait for the summit and maybe just give us a point update that will make it compatible with the Mac Pro and Catalina?
Yeah.
Well, apparently the Mac Pro can run Mojave, so the Mac Pro may not necessarily require Catalina. But yeah, they've got to bring out a version of Final Cut that runs without any 32-bit stuff. And apparently, according to something I read on Facebook today, there are some libraries which are 32-bit, which, so they may have to, put at least a point update for that. And look, who knows? So they have to have something that works on Catalina, which I'm guessing there must be some small problem.
Right.
Or the OS, maybe Catalina can incorporate a couple of small things that work around it for Final Cut. That's, but yeah, I don't know. I think if we see another 10.4 something, then it'll be minor updates. And if we see a 10.5, there'll be a couple of tentpole big new features.
If Apple brings out a version of Final Cut 10.4 point something to coincide with the Mac Pro, which is very possible, I still think they're going to do something at the Creative Summit that's not public yet, whether that's 10.5 or a preview of 10.5 or whatever, because one of the big draw points to going to the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit is Apple revealing something. either like the day before, so the team can show us something new or whatever. But if they do 10.4 point something, I still expect something new to come out at the summit, because if they do it in September, which I don't know if they will or not, because September is iPhone month at Apple typically. So, but I still think we'll see something new closer to the Creative Summit, whatever that may be. Ian, are you coming?
Yes.
You are?
Yes, I'm coming. I think it's probably safe to announce, yes, I'll be speaking again. So, yay.
What about Lee? You going to come? I met Lee last year.
Yes. What about Lee?
I will also be speaking. I booked my tickets like an hour ago.
Oh, there you go. I've changed mine like 2 or 3 different times.
Yeah, that wouldn't have been fun for us.
Yeah, well, so as far as the FCPX Creative Summit, that's where, that's like as Philip Hodges likes to call it, the Final Cut Pro Family Reunion, annual family reunion in Cupertino. And they've changed it this year. It used to be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now it's Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. However, I was planning on coming in Wednesday night so I can get a fresh start Thursday morning. Wednesday night hotel rooms, there's surge pricing, and they're over $400.
Yes.
So I'm not paying for my hotel. I get I'm sponsored, so I get that taken care of. But they're not doing Wednesday night. That's what I found out. So now I got to come in on Thursday to San Jose. So.
Well, it only starts at 1 p.m. on Thursday. So
right, to accommodate.
The idea for most people is that they've said, look, fly in on Thursday during the morning, and then we'll start after lunch. It doesn't work from Australia because the flights don't arrive at the right time. Yeah, well, so we arrive at like 11 a.m. at San Francisco, which
and we have to leave in July.
Yeah. Lee and I ended up on the same plane from Auckland last year, and we were stuck for an hour in San Francisco just in immigration because we got in the wrong queue. Well, we were in the queue we were told to go into, which was the slowest queue in the world.
But I've got my
we kind of wouldn't work.
But I've got my fancy visa now, so I'm dumping you this time.
So speaking of the summit, happy birthday to Liat from Future Media Concepts. It's her birthday today.
Well, happy birthday to her.
Happy birthday.
She'll be there at the Creative Summit. So I'm excited about the Creative Summit. I'll be there again this year. This will be my 4th year. I think.
Will this be the first one post Steve Bays leaving Apple?
Yes. Yeah.
No, he was there last year, but he wasn't in charge. So he was wandering around.
Oh, okay.
Last year, but he was, he could talk to him a bit because he wasn't doing any presentation.
So one of the main, Apple had that. One of the main things, Apple had that fantastic meeting with us. A private room, private conversation at the Juniper, and I'm hoping they're going to do that again. They have not announced that for sure, but that's what I'm looking for. That's in addition to going to see the team do their presentation at Apple HQ at One Infinite Loop. So that's one of the biggest things I hope happens again, is we get to have a conversation, which you can't talk about what happened during there, but I will say that Dupe Detection was brought up. I'm not going to say in what context, but I mean that's. So they know about Dupe Detection. I know you know that. But
I know they do.
Yeah, they know about it. They have their own agenda, their own. When I worked at the National Archives, it's like. I worked with the federal government, and you can imagine how frustrating that can be sometimes. Not all the time, but sometimes. I do like to be a little more creative than they particularly liked and stuff. So I understand sometimes there's frustration in trying to get things done the way you want them done, but they have a different idea, a different schedule, whatever.
And I tend to think they always look at the best way that they could do it. So I guess they don't want to give us just what we expect. They want to give us something and some extras, a bit like with Roll's View. I think I was asking for that before it came out, and what we got was so much more. It was amazing.
Yeah, I was looking for curves, and when curves arrived, I remember seeing that in the room, and I go, yeah! yes, and
exactly.
I remember Steve Bays looking over in my way, what?
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, sorry, really excited. I wanted curves, and they did a great job of implementing curves.
And also developing software is like a game of Jenga, where they may have done dupe detection 3 or 4 different ways, but it broke 20 other things, and they were like, oh no, we can't do that now.
Right, that's exactly right. They have to, of course, consider everything, and they have their own ideas as well. I mean, they surprise us with features a lot of times, and I expect that to happen with 10.5. Maybe not the 10.4 version that's coming out, but 10.5 for sure. I expect them to have. I understand they're going to be optimizing for the Mac Pro and optimizing for Metal and all that, but I still expect major features to be incorporated. It's been 2 years. At the Creative Summit, it'll be 2 years, and a typical upgrade cycle is only 18 months between major full number versions. So we gave them 6 months extra time. Give us something we like.
Yeah, advanced mode. That's what I want.
So Matt, Shawn, are any of you guys going to come to the summit by any chance?
Probably not this year. I think I made it to the first one, but I think the work the last few months has been a little bit quieter, so it's probably not quite on the agenda for this year. But I think I'll start putting some pennies away for next year when we hopefully get 10.6.
There you go. So Shawn, you have to come because you're the only one in this group that I haven't met in person.
I know. Yes, it's embarrassing. But
we've been talking for years.
I do want to come over.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I'd love to get over. So I'm gonna do everything that I possibly can to make it happen.
Yeah, Matt was at NAB. Was it a year and a half ago?
2018.
Yeah. Got to meet Mr. Matt.
That was a good week.
That was a good week. Last year's NAB was not. They didn't have any Final Cut Pro specific events, which was kind of. The last 2 years before that they did. Apple did presentations 2 years before that at 2 different NABs, but last year they didn't do one. So.
Yeah, I think the whole of NAB was pretty dull, wasn't it?
What was?
The whole of NAB this year was pretty dull.
Except for the LumaForge Faster Together stage and party.
But I just mean NAB in general, not just it wasn't, I can't remember anything really.
Right. Well, Blackmagic came out with their $1,200 keyboard or whatever that was, and DaVinci Resolve 16. I like Blackmagic. If I wasn't doing that, if I wasn't on Final Cut Pro, I'm sure I'd be using them just because, I like their innovation. I don't,
Yeah. At least the $1,200 keyboard doesn't have a $1,000 stand.
If you can, you don't have to get that stand.
And I will not.
No, I wouldn't either. I'm not getting a display either. That's nothing that I need. But you can get what do they call it? A Visa stand, one of those Visa mounts or whatever. And third parties will have stands that'll work fine. So you absolutely do not need the $1,000 stand. But I mean, this is Apple. Come on. I mean, everything Apple does is premium priced.
Well, no, and I can, I look at it as like, I call it the tripod justification, where, people look at video tripods and go, oh my goodness, you spent $4,000 on a tripod. But I've got to say to them, yeah, but I spent $80,000 on the camera, $40,000 on the lens. If I'm going to put $100,000 worth of gear on a tripod, $4,000 for the tripod suddenly doesn't seem that much. By the way, I don't have a $100,000 camera, but I'm just saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be questioning a $100,000 camera, to be honest. That's
in this day and age, right?
Yeah, true.
Oh no, that costs $25,000 for a lens easily, for a professional camera.
Well, exactly. The glass costs a fortune. Absolutely.
Yeah. $12,000 for a satchel head with another $5,000 for the legs.
So the $1,000
those
looks
prices
pretty
haven't
good,
come
right?
down at all. Yeah.
Pretty good for professionals.
It's funny how you see people, complaining about these prices, and I think my first Avid I got for half price for $80,000.
It's a bargain.
Well, that's I remember those. I remember those days.
Yeah.
I remember when we first started getting into DV and Steve Jobs was in charge of Apple, and it seemed like he was getting pissed at both Adobe and Avid because both of them at one point dropped support for the Mac. And I know Jobs, of course, did not like that. So, I mean, that's when I stopped using Adobe for the most part, was when they dropped support for, I was on Premiere for the Mac, and then when they dropped support for it, I said, well, Final Cut Pro came out. I said, well, there you go. Plus, that version of Avid Premiere wasn't very stable anyway.
Yeah, I think Jobs was really aware of that halo effect that came from professionals using Apple products. And I think when Avid, there were rumors that Avid was saying that they were going to drop the Mac. And it was only, I don't know, maybe 6 months after that all of a sudden Final Cut Pro popped up. And it was instantly bought from Macromedia, I think it was, Keygrip or whatever it was called. Mm-hmm. And you could just see that Jobs was not going to let that space disappear. That's the way I read it. And it certainly worked, because then everyone was talking about Final Cut for the next 10 years, and it just was growing at such a phenomenal rate. It really put Apple, back in the map of professionals, I thought.
It's very interesting how we live in our bubble of Final Cut users, and other people live in, PC focused bubbles and, Premiere focused bubbles. And we all have this, and obviously Avid bubbles. And we all have this opinions like, oh no, all professionals use Avid, or everyone I know uses Premiere. And clearly there are millions of seats of Final Cut out there as well. But really, there aren't that many of any of us. There aren't that many people who do editing. And so, there is space for anyone who uses any of these editing packages to, to pick up some of the other ones and have a look around. And look, Final Cut Pro is an essential product for the Mac. I don't think Apple's going to let it go anytime soon. There was a, recent video that Linus, who does, Linus, can't remember his surname, Linus Tech Tips.
Right.
He does a, why is the Mac better? And, points from his readers and his, focus groups, because he's very much in a, he does appreciate the Mac, and he'll do a fairish review, but he'll absolutely ping them for doing something that costs too much. And one of his big things was exclusives, and Final Cut Pro was, from his perspective, people love Final Cut Pro. And it's like, oh, okay, that's nice that, someone who's definitely outside the bubble, sees that it is really important. And, I think Apple do realize, how important it is to have Final Cut Pro out there, because without, gluey software that sticks you to a platform, some people would leave and go to other platforms. And there's not that many things which are, Mac only and essential. Lots of other things across platform, and you could go, despite the operating system being ugly or horrible or a pain, or just inconvenient, there are some things which is like, well, look, I wouldn't want to leave the Mac, but I can't, because there's stuff I can do which is definitely Mac only. Right, and I think a lot of people forget that there are plugins which work across, Final Cut and Premiere and After Effects, like Nodes from YanoBox, which only work on the Mac because they're using Quartz Composer behind the scenes, which doesn't exist on Windows. So you can't jump ship if you want all your plugins to work. And so Apple has powerful incentive to keep stuff like Final Cut going. It is the hey, look guys, look at the great software you can make. No,
absolutely,
on the Mac.
And for me, Logic as well. So Alex Gollner says, tell us about the Oz video scene: film, TV, corporate events, social media. So, Shawn, you're involved with television production mostly?
Yeah.
And that's mostly all Avid, right?
Yeah, mostly all the large sort of shows are all Avid, dramas, reality shows. I'm beginning to see a little bit of Premiere creeping in now. The ABC here, which is the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, has switched to Premiere. So you're seeing more requests for Premiere editors, and obviously all the commercial, because they all already have After Effects. It's just a no-brainer for them to switch on to Premiere. So that's what's happening. Final Cut Pro, I haven't seen it really move at all. If anything, it's gone backwards in my industry. But there's a bit of a groundswell, but it's still not at the fore yet. So that's where I would say we're at the moment.
What about corporate? Same?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's similar. There's a lot of, like I said earlier, with the Creative Cloud and the simplicity of the seats moving in those bigger places, both in corporates and in advertising agencies. I'm seeing that a lot more. But in the smaller corporate spaces, and I think I'm probably, I'm very much inside of I'm already in a bubble, and then I'm in another little bubble where I seek out corporate producers that use Final Cut. And that's kind of, that's my bag, is going into places where people probably have started their own media company. They started out in photography, got into video, now they're editing their own stuff, and they get busier and busier, and then they realize that they actually need somebody who specializes a little bit. And then that's kind of where I pop in and say, yep, cool, I'll take the post off your hands, and you can do what you love, and I can do what I love, and we'll all make some money.
So Matt has one of the most difficult gigs I've seen anybody have. In all the filming, he does fashion shows every year. That's got to be horrible work, right? Tell us about that.
It's a lot harder than it sounds.
I know logistically it is, but there are perks, right?
I've had to shoot some of those. Perks. They're awful.
Yeah, there are perks, but there's only, as somebody who's not particularly into fashion, I come at it from a very interesting point of view. So, but Final Cut is great for that stuff, because you can have a half hour show in film strip view and put it on fast forward, and I get through half an hour in 2.5 minutes. IOF every time a model walks from the back to the front. As soon as she hits there, you're boom, boom, boom. And you don't even have to pause. It's just, and I've had people walk past me as I'm doing that, and they think they think something's wrong with me because I'm just hitting the same 3 buttons. Like,
you look like a squirrel at a keyboard.
I love that style of editing, though. It's so much fun.
And then you hit Control F, and then all you see is the outfits, is the models ready to go into a timeline. Sure, you've only got one angle, but then it's, you've got a bed for your edit straight away. And when you're doing that kind of event editing, when it's supposed to be, within hours of the event being complete, they've got to have something online. Right. You've got to be quick. And I don't know how people do those kind of events in anything else. I've tried using hover scrub in Premiere. I've really tried.
Well, it's like semi-hover scrub. It's not really there yet.
No. And there's no film strip, so it's, you're scrubbing on a thumbnail that's, the size of my face on my screen here. And
it doesn't work for a half-hour clip.
No.
So does Premiere? Can you load a project in Premiere and scrub it in their version of the browser?
No.
You can't. I'm surprised you can't do it in Final Cut Pro after all this time as well. I mean, you can scrub compound clips in the browser. You can scrub multicam clips in the browser. And you can scrub the project clip in the share window. It scrubs. It's live. You can scrub it. But for some reason, you still can't scrub it in the browser, and that's aggravating.
Yeah. It used to work in 10.0.
Because it's a project.
They had the project library.
Oh, Shawn, we know how you feel about projects.
You know what it probably is, Shawn, is they've got it working, but every time they get the project skimming working in the browser, it breaks dupe detection.
Probably.
That, or every time they get a request, they put it to the back burner instead of the front.
The thing is, with your event stuff, Matt, I mean, you can see there's an obvious commercial need for getting that stuff out instantly, but I think we all need, anyone making events like that does need to do more videos. I think there is more room in the market for small videos, which not that many people necessarily will watch straight away, but in a few years' time, end up being the only record of the event. And
absolutely.
that's what I've made a lot of over the last few years at the 48-hour video game making challenges here in Brisbane, which don't happen anymore. And now I'm doing a yearly exhibit, which has a lot of the same people doing the same things. And I spoke to a ton of people just this Saturday where I went to shoot this year's exhibition, and they said, oh yeah, it was really helpful having last year's video because I could explain to people what the event was about. And, it helped us get, the permission or whatever to come here. And all the game makers obviously really appreciate some advertising for their games. And, that video actually just went live on my Vimeo account because that was shot on Saturday. I've edited it, on and off since then, and it went live tonight, and it's helpful for the game makers. So
for sure.
Yay.
Yeah.
But I mean, only a few hundred people will probably ever see that. Sometimes a lot of people see them, but it's unlikely.
No, I think I've done those fashion show videos now for 4 years, I think. Yeah. And I think the most views that any of them have is still less than 2,000. They don't go out to a huge amount of people. They go out on Instagram, and the Instagram versions get more eyes on them in that 24 hours after the event is on, and then they disappear because they're down in the feed. And then they exist on a YouTube playlist, and if people want to look at them, they can. But you're right. After a certain amount of time, they become the only video record of that event ever taking place. Yeah. So there's definitely a hole there somewhere.
Yeah. There's there might be 2,000 viewers, but 15 of those are really important people who needed to see what happened then. And so it actually ends up being an essential service. Not every view is as valuable as every other view. No, and not every view is, 20 cents payment on YouTube ads.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. I've actually got to disappear. My son is woken up. He's been sick this week, so I've got to disappear and help my wife.
Can you put your dog on instead of you? Just put him up there for us.
I would love to do that. That would be hilarious.
Matt, before you go, what do you want to tell Apple? Because they do listen to this show. What do you want to tell them about Final Cut Pro? Either a request or just a suggestion or whatever.
Look, just listen to Shawn. Give us Dupe Detection, so he will shut up. Don't worry about the nomenclature and the naming of things. We know.
Don't worry about that. That's so important.
But give him Dupe Detection, and then we can all just move on.
Excellent.
It was lovely talking to you guys.
Absolutely.
And, hopefully see some of you in the flesh soon.
Yeah, I'll be reporting live from the Creative Summit anytime there's anything new going on. So
look forward to jumping on the streams.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Lovely chatting to you all, guys. See you later.
Okay, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
All right. See you, Matt.
Bye. There we go. Now we're a different layout. So when you have 5 people, 2 on top and 3 across the bottom, now we have 4 equal squares. So are you guys going to talk about what you're going to be talking about at the summit, or is that too early to talk about that yet?
Ooh.
They haven't announced it
too
yet.
Early.
Yeah.
Oh, we haven't announced it yet.
They just have Chris Fenwick and then Steve Martin, Jeff Greenberg, and Mark Spencer so far.
I'm sure we'll be on the website pretty soon.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
I still am from last year.
Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Exactly. So Lee, you're in the United States a lot. What the heck are you doing over here? When I was talking to you, trying to schedule you, you say, well, you're going to be in the States for like weeks at a time.
Yeah. So I'm actually a week and a half from now. I'll be in Denver for 10 days, shooting a course for an online training company. It's going to be a cool course. Actually, everyone in this chat would really appreciate it. It's called How to Not Fix It in Post. And
there you go.
It's gonna be taking production people through all the stuff that irks some of us editors, and says, here's some techniques that you can use in production so that we have less work to do in post.
Yeah. Oh, look, I was talking to a cameraman the other night at this event, and he was saying that, you know, we were mutually bitching about, you know, when we don't have enough coverage as editors because the camera people didn't get enough shots. And he was saying, yeah, his rule is, you know, 5 by 5 by 5, which is 5 different focal lengths and 5 different angles for 5 seconds each, which is, so that's what we need. So any shooters watching this, give us more B-roll. More B-roll, please.
If you shot enough B-roll, shoot some more.
Yeah, exactly. So Dennis Barnes says, what software are you using for this live stream? So it's an amalgam of multiple pieces of software and multiple pieces of hardware. I think the main thing you're talking about is I'm using Ecamm Live. That's the main envelope that controls everything, but I have other pieces of software going into it. I Restream IO, and I have a separate audio interface and a bunch of other things. So that's how I do it. I've been honing it for like over a year up here in the studio. And then I'm going to be moving down. If I get the Mac Pro like I want, I'm going to be moving downstairs into my big studio, and I'll redo it all down there, whenever that's going to happen. I'm not going to buy the Mac Pro right off the bat. I'm going to wait to see the real world reviews on, you know, make sure it's what I expect it to be, make sure it's upgradable. You know, obviously graphics card, SSDs, RAM, all that stuff's upgradable very easily. I&O cards, because I'm going to be getting probably a recording studio PCIe card that I like. So I'm going to make sure it's going to be up to spec, up to what I expect for that kind of money, but probably 2020 I'll get one.
I think I'll get one too.
You're going to get one too?
I think so, yeah. Yeah. It bothers me throwing away these beautiful 5K screens.
Exactly.
It just seems ridiculous.
You can throw them at my place.
Yeah. Well,
I'll not throw them away, but just I've got one sitting there, you know, just.
It is a real bummer.
A space on my desk.
It doesn't work. it really, it used to work, and I think it would be terrific if they just put in that extra chip or whatever to make these machines have a longer life as a monitor. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, you're right, Ian. If you could use these iMacs as if you start up another machine and use it like they used to do, what would they call that? They used to be FireWire.
Yeah, target display.
Target disk mode. I don't know why something happened. You can't do that anymore. But I agree. I would use this as a second monitor.
The way it synchronizes the 5K, it's got like 2 panels running interleaved or something like that. One thing you were talking about the widescreen monitor, which I love the idea of, but I'm not crazy about the idea of with Final Cut, because can Final Cut, if you use it in a large monitor like that, can you get one side of it to just be the browser, or is the timeline always going to take the whole bottom of the screen?
I presume it's going to take the whole bottom of the screen unless the monitor has that feature somehow built in. But I'm going to get a vertical. I'm going to get a vertical monitor for the left-hand side for the browser and stuff.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Dedicate the entire screen to the long timeline and just do a vertical browser on the side for data and stuff. That's what I'm planning on doing. But I have my 5K iMac right here that I'm using, but next to it I have a 34-inch LG monitor over here, which I really, really like. But I'd rather just have one monitor for the main interface. So that's one of the reasons. Have we covered everything? Have we solved all of the problems for Final Cut for 2019? I think we have.
Well, except for Dupe Detection.
Well, I mean,
and I'll mention the naming is still a huge problem for me, unfortunately. But.
Yeah, I ignore those names. I ignore them. I don't. I call.
I ignore them too. It doesn't bother. They could call them a chicken and a dog, but it's when I go and I try to convert somebody, and then I say, "Oh, this is called a project," and they go, "Oh, it's like I've told them, the world's ending."
Well, whenever I'm explaining to make a new dog and put the chicken inside the dog and then the cat inside the chicken, it's like, it is a little confusing.
Yeah, I use.
So someone mentioned to me that they call it a project timeline, just so that they can get
Hey, it works.
So that actually works for me. So I say this is a project timeline,
right?
So that at least it's not so confusing. And then we started using Keyflow Pro, and they call what Final Cut Pro calls events. They call them projects.
Do they?
Yes. So it just gets worse.
Yeah,
and then you
that's why it
end
all
up going to
confusing.
Resolve, and then you start a project in Resolve with sequences and bins. It's just
No, I call a project a project. I don't call a timeline. I call a timeline, and a project in a project. Period. That's what I.
Why
that's
they
what I
did it,
use.
I have no idea.
Well, all these things have different names. It's not even. Well, yeah, as you say, even if Final Cut was the same, you'd still have a disconnect between Keyflow Pro and Resolve, and they're not all the same. It's a bit of a shame.
It's funny. I was actually having coffee with someone in the Final Cut team, and they said, "Oh, what's the one thing?" And yeah, this is one of the things I said to them. I said, "Can you call it what everyone else calls it?"
Yeah.
Just
what
do
did they
that.
say?
I think, yeah.
And it's not hard.
Who was it, and what did they say?
It's not going to break anything.
They said,
Yeah, that's why I want to go to the summit. That's the main. Forget Dupe Detection. I just want them to call a sequence a sequence.
Oh, really? That's more important to you. I'm surprised.
That's more important to me. Just because I've got a better chance of winning people over if I don't have to go over that hurdle every single time.
I have looked at this, and it is possible to dig into the Final Cut bundle, the application bundle, and find the files where the menus and stuff are referenced, and you can just edit it. Okay, so where it says new project, it says new sequence. It didn't break anything. It worked fine. I'm not sure if I've still got it here, but yeah, look, I'm sure it's something that would be better done by Apple. But yeah, look, no, I've got a copy here. I'm looking at it called Final Cut Pro Copy. And I can tell you right now that in that version of Final Cut, it says new sequence instead of project.
For Chris Hocking to implement in the next
I've asked him already, can we shut Shawn up somehow? I mean, can we introduce a way so that everyone can call things what they want? Because the other way to do it would be to introduce a new language. And I think we call it English-Shawn. And in that version of it, it has the correct names for everything. But that would be a really nice way to make things work.
Well, doesn't just needs to be called professional, or the same as everyone else, like Avid or.
I think Chris has stopped going into the Final Cut Pro bundle, though. He stopped doing that because it was causing some problems, perhaps.
Yeah, I think it is something that could be done in a safe way.
No, I mean, just do it yourself, sure. Something just.
And I think they've gone so far down the track now that there are people that are using it that love the name project because they are just doing one edit and they're sticking on YouTube or whatever they're doing with it, and then they're moving on. And I think the way that Logic has done it with an advanced mode is perfect.
Yep.
It actually does change some of the naming. So if you're comfortable with that naming convention, then you just flick it to advanced mode and you get a bunch of sequences.
And not only that, but with Logic, you can create a project file that contains everything, or you can make a folder which has the project file separate and all the media separate right from the beginning. You can do that automatically, which I really, really like. Yeah.
I'd love to see that in Final Cut.
I would too. Absolutely.
Yep. Just for when you're training those producers or things, that's what I love about it, is that the way that it scales. When I work with television producers who are not using Final Cut and they're using Avid or Premiere, they just don't want to. They don't want to know. They'll just watch the video and write down their notes. They'll write down the edits, and they're usually within QE of where they should be. But with Final Cut, they'll sit there and they'll do the edit, and they'll give me the edit, and then I can clean it up. So it's enormously time saving, and they're completely comfortable with it. They love it. But with the other programs, they won't even touch them because they're just terrified of putting things out of sync, and they just see all these menus and bins and, because the interface is just so overwhelming for them. It's great the way that it scales. And I think just adding that one extra layer of advanced mode where it just turns on a bunch of extra features would be amazing.
So you guys, how many people in Australia, is it proportional to the United States that use Final Cut versus other things, whether or not that's their primary or not? I mean, is there a large Final Cut community? There seems to be, because I know as far as foreign countries, I know more Australians that use Final Cut than any other country. I mean, that's my personal experience.
Yeah, we're quite loud and annoying that way. but not in Brisbane. Brisbane doesn't have a huge TV community. I mean, they shoot the occasional film here, like, Thor Ragnarok or whatever was just shot, some in Brisbane, some down the Gold Coast, but, that's obviously going to be Avid, and it's one job. There's not that much TV. It's all down in Melbourne where you guys are, or in Sydney.
What about like wedding videography and event videography? Same?
I think that's really taking off. I think there's a real groundswell, and Australians are real early love to adopt new technology. I think that's why we always, every time Apple releases something new, Australia's always up there. We're always the first to get the HomePod, or the first to get Apple Music, or because we just grab it. It's new, we'll just grab it. So I think for those things, Final Cut is probably a lot more there than lets on in my industry anyway.
Right.
And certainly a lot of people. The one thing I do notice is there's a lot less negative talk about it now. But people just don't care. I guess they just don't use it because they're not getting the opportunity. But it's not that hostility that there was sort of 5 years ago. So that's good.
Yeah, I save my hostility for more important things than software.
Yes, exactly.
Not that I have that much. I try to keep a more positive outlook on life, but I understand the frustration people have. I mean, it's just that I didn't jump into those conversations at the early stages, and I try to avoid them now for the most part. I read them and watch and look at them, but I don't really get that involved. There's other things I'd rather be involved with, like animal rescue and some other things. So.
Yeah, and I think it's a case of we all love Final Cut and we know it's a better way. But I was just so this last weekend I was in Sydney judging a film competition. Actually, I'm on a committee of the Australian Professional Video Organisation, and I was chatting to one of the guys there who won, and the stuff that they did was absolutely stunning. And we were talking about NLEs and things like that. And I never do the whole, Final Cut is better and so on. I just go, hey, look, Final Cut's what I prefer. You can use whatever you like.
Right.
And he said something to me, which I think a couple of people have said to me in the past, which is so true. It's no one is ever going to watch something and go, oh, I know exactly what that was cut on.
Right. Right.
Oh, you can.
Unless there's a transition or some music, I know. Yeah, there's a couple of ones where I'm like, oh, that's the iMovie thing. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, 3D text and a few of the transitions are just dead giveaways.
Yeah, but you know what I was trying to say.
Yes.
I do. I do.
This has been great, guys. I sure appreciate you taking the time to join us here. This has been a good session. We're going to do one more later this month from Australia because I know so many people. I mean, the last Creative Summit, there's how many people from Australia? There's you and Lee, Ian, and a bunch of other Australians. But that was interesting because I think that's been the most, right, that I've ever seen.
Well, there are quite a few. A couple of whom are actually, part of the Final Cut Pro team.
Well, that's true too. Estelle and Luke. But Estelle's no longer there. Estelle left.
No.
Oh. So it was just I think for personal reasons. So. Okay.
Well, do you know who's in charge of Final Cut now? Now that Steve's gone, if Estelle's gone as well.
They I think they're looking for a new person, one or two new people. I'm not sure if they hired him yet, but it's just going to Estelle's. Here you go. I know the first two things that would happen if Shawn was in charge: Dupe Detection and renaming all the sequences and stuff to projects and timelines like this.
Dupe Detection will be the priority. Just stop what you're doing.
I offered before, what was his name, that did the Motion to Final Cut Pro conversion before he joined Apple.
Wes Plate.
Wes Plate. He was on one of these chats one time, and I said, I will give you $100 if you make a scrolling timeline plugin. But I don't think he's done that yet, so now it's too late. All right, gentlemen, I sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll talk to you all later.
Okay.
Cool.
Bye.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.